Welcome back to another episode of the Daily Beacon Sports Podcast, joined by my friend this way from the Kentucky Kernel, Cole, who's actually in New Orleans right now because his paper is up for a lot of awards. So I had to represent the city, state that's been kind to me. So, Cole, man, how are you?
We're doing great, doing great. In this empty conference room we're in right now, making sure we get some peace and quiet and some free Wi-Fi. Excited to be here in New Orleans, hopefully win some awards, and excited to not be in Lexington for a week.
Well, let's dive right into the vibe in Lexington. Man, what is Mark Stoops' seat? Is it still cold, or what's happening up there with Kentucky football?
Well, that's a difficult question in terms of if his seat's actually hot or not is more on the athletic department itself than fans. Fans want him gone. Most fans have given up on him. I have um, certain people I know within the program who have said certain players are frustrated with the coaching. I mean, it's reached kind of a point that it almost feels a lot like Calipari, the point of no return with the fan base. Um, Now Stoops basically has a lifetime deal at Kentucky. Essentially, his buyout would be over 40 million to get him out of there. Um, and I just realistically don't see that happening from the athletic department. So I would say his actual seat isn't super hot in terms of is he going to lose his job? Now, if you're going to say whether he should, I don't necessarily know. But if fans want him to, yes, a lot of fans really want Mark Stoops gone. And it's more just a question of what does Mark want? Because it's one of those deals where if he's going to go, it's probably going to be because he leaves on his own.
So about the same as Calipari, then, who conveniently for Kentucky left on his own to go to
Left on his own.
a SEC rival. Well, I know from people who have watched Kentucky and Mark Stoops this year, there's for the Georgia and Ole Miss games where you beat Ole Miss and then you look like you're pushing Georgia to its wits end. And then there's been the rest of the season. What's been the difference in those games compared to, when they go up against Ole Miss and Georgia and come out with those wins?
I think in a lot of ways it's just kind of fallen off the rails. The offense has always been poor. If you notice the Georgia game, the Ole Miss game, they weren't really offensive masterclasses by any stretch of the imagination. I mean, the Georgia game was a 1 point game, both below 20. So Kentucky really held Georgia defensively, which has aged better in retrospect now that Georgia's back to doing great things, beating the crap out of teams like Texas. But the Ole Miss, you could say that Ole Miss was maybe a little more fraudulent than the number 6 team in the country that they were when Kentucky went into there, but it was a good performance from the Wildcats. I'd say South Carolina, you could almost just chalk up to Kentucky just not really knowing what it had, not really being prepared for that. They kind of got punched in the mouth by the Gamecocks and just did not respond. But it seemed like things were going the right direction. That even when the offense wasn't reliable, the defense was. And then you go into the bye week, and I don't know what happened on this bye week. I don't know what was said on this bye week, but you come take Vanderbilt right after the bye week and just can't get it done against a red hot Vanderbilt squad who had just beaten Alabama. So, maybe the defense is a little demoralized. I don't know. But then you host Auburn, which you and I both know that Auburn, a once very strong program, is kind of a shell of itself right now. And it just did not look good on any side of the ball. Offense was bad. Defense crumbled. Special teams wasn't very good. Wasn't very good. I almost said great there. Just across the board, really, really bad play. And a lot of it is, I don't know, for whatever reason, the fans, they're doing their part, but this team can't win at home. I don't understand that. I want to say like 2-11 in their last 13 SEC home games or something like that, which is insane. Um, it's a miracle they held Georgia close considering that, but the big wins they've gotten in the last few years have been on the road. But that's not to say even that's a end all be all because they go down to Florida and they can't get that done either. So against a Florida team that didn't have its starting quarterback and had a ton of injury issues at that. So I at this point, it's not a question of what Kentucky's going to be anymore. It's a question of are they going to lose their bowl streak because there's a legitimate chance this team doesn't get to 6 wins.
And you mentioned the offense a little bit there off the top. What's the quarterback situation like coming into this week? I know nobody who Kentucky has put on the podium media wise this week has really committed to what that quarterback situation is going to look like. What is that going to be like? What's been the offensive issues so far this season?
Um, As far as I know, and from what I've heard, Brock is still expected to be the starting guy going into Tennessee. Um, former five-star guy coming out of Georgia. A lot of hype around Brock Vandagriff just hasn't lived up to it. I mean, I don't know. There's been one game where he's been spectacular, maybe Ohio, I guess, but even then, he's been shaky. We saw last week against Auburn, they tried throwing Gavin Wimsatt, the Rutgers transfer, as the backup. They kept him out there pretty much the entire second half, and well, that didn't really work either. So in Florida, you saw them throw the freshman Cutter Boley out there, first play pick six. You really hate to see it for the Kentucky kid there, but I don't really know. It seems everything they've tried has failed. Gavin Wimsatt failed when they put him in there. Brock Vandagriff has failed when he started, and Cutter Boley is just not ready to be that kind of quarterback. And what are you going to go to your fourth string, Bo Allen? I mean, we're talking crazy here. So as far as I'm aware, Brock will still be the starter, but I wouldn't even just say, quarterback play has been really bad across the board. The offensive line's been shaky. And now you have Chip Trayanum still out with another injury now, not the same one as he had originally. It's another one now. Demi was out last game, Demi Sumo Kongbe, who had kind of stepped up into that running back one role. Jamarian Wilcox is solid, but he's more of a, kind of a complimentary back, not necessarily the guy who needs to hold all the production on his own. So Patterson and Wilcox are trying to manage that, but you're looking at an offense right now who can't seem to figure it out at quarterback, and they've got both of their best running backs hurt too now. So what do you really do with that situation? You can't run, you
And
can't pass.
correct me if I'm wrong, Cutter Boley reclassed to enter college a year early, right?
Off the top of my head, I don't recall. I should probably have that off the top of my head.
Well, I want to say he did because he was a guy that Tennessee wanted, but I think he wanted to reclass. All of that to say, if Kentucky's top two options don't work, I don't think you're going to turn to a borderline 16-year-old if he did reclass. So
Well, hey, the
off
Kentucky
that,
Kernel put out a column saying they should. So it was not my column, was not my column, but someone wrote a column saying they should. I do think it's funny in a very disappointing kind of way that his first ever pass, literally first pass, was a pick six at Florida. So just what are we doing here? But yeah, it's a mess.
well, with that being said, I wrote it today and yesterday that Kentucky is a defensive minded team because they're not offensive minded. You hope they're defensive minded. What's this defense hold, and what do you think the game plan will be against Tennessee?
I would have said, after the Georgia and Ole Miss games, I would have said that Kentucky's got one of the best defenses in the SEC. You've got so many veteran guys in that lineup. JJ Weaver, who left a game recently hurt, so that's concerning. Very veteran defensive line with Octavius Oxendine, Trayvon Ribka, Keyshawn Silver, Deion Walker. These are guys who could get it done. Your backs, you've got JJ Weaver. I mean, JQ Hardaway got his first pick recently as a corner. I would have said Maxwell Hairston was one who was on a bunch of award lists, but he hasn't played in like 4 games, and I think he's probably going to be out this week too. Um, so injuries are definitely hurting that group a little bit, but it's not just that either. This is a defense that came into this year really confident, really strong, and they were the only thing that was really keeping Kentucky in games. And I don't know if it's just this poor form. I don't know if it's just the games themselves, but you look at the Auburn game and the defense crumbled, quite frankly, against Vanderbilt. It could not get it done. So even the defense now, the once, famed defense I would have said was top of the SEC is slipping. It's falling. We had a story come out from my assistant who was writing about, at one point they were ranked like third, fourth in the SEC, and now their metrics are getting down to like eighth, ninth, and they're falling. They're slipping. They're not making the plays they used to be making. And I don't want to, put words in their mouths, but it almost feels like they're giving up in a lot of ways.
So we've talked about the offensive issues. The defense has regressed. What will it take from Kentucky to get an upset this weekend?
Ooh, is a miracle a good answer? I mean, I was in Tennessee 2 years ago for what I recall being a 44-6, 44-7 thrashing. And that was a better Kentucky team than this one is. So maybe not on paper, but in practice it was. If you're asking what it takes, I don't believe they will. I simply don't believe it's going to happen. But if there were anything that would have to happen, Tennessee would have to play badly, first of all. If Tennessee plays what it's capable of playing, there's nothing Kentucky could do. Tennessee will have to have a really poor game, maybe kind of maybe even worse than they played against Arkansas when they got upset there. And Kentucky would just somehow, some way have to come out confident, come out not looking like the defeated group they've been the past 3 weeks, not come out playing like they're terrified of the Tennessee fans and this Tennessee team who has shown they're capable of, yes, losing to Arkansas, but also defeating an Alabama, winning these games, being at the top of the SEC in that conversation. So realistically, it would take a complete shift in momentum across the board for the Wildcats and a poor performance from Tennessee if Kentucky's going to really do anything. But I would have said something similar going into Ole Miss. So maybe I just don't know anything. It's possible.
Well, now you really have to show if you know something. We ask you for a score prediction. So put you on
Uh,
the spot.
well, I'll take reference from the game I watched 2 years ago, take into account how that Tennessee team was versus how this Kentucky team is, and I'm gonna go. I think Tennessee's offense at times can start a little slow before really getting going, so I will give them 38-3, Tennessee.
I guess I'm more optimistic than you. I said 28-10,
I think it's
Tennessee.
bold to think this Kentucky team gets the touchdown. Quite frankly, the way they've been playing, that's a large task right now with the way they've been playing.
Awesome, Cole. Well, have fun in New Orleans, man. Why don't you plug everything you and the Colonel are doing? And hopefully, if anybody checks out your website after this weekend, you'll have some awards at the top.
Hopefully so. So we post all of our stories on kykernel.com. The KentuckyKernel.com goes to a flour company. So kykernel.com. Our sports Twitter that we post all of our sports content on is at kykernel sports. We also have at kykernel on Twitter, on Instagram as well. We have a newsletter we send out if you're interested in that kind of thing. But very active on our sports page. That's what I run, the sports editor. So mostly Twitter, KY Kernel Sports, kykernel.com, or my personal Twitter, Colepark_WSC, if you want to check me out. But it would be on this show.
Yeah, and for anybody who's a One Knox fan, this guy was the Lexington. What were y'all? Lexington FC.
Lexington Sporting Club, Lexington
Ooh,
SC.
Lexington SC. He's their PR guy. So any complaints, talk to him. Oh, Cole, I appreciate it again, man. For Cole from the Kentucky Kernel and Caleb Jarrow from the Daily Beacon, we'll have a ton of coverage, both of us respectively, win, lose, or draw this weekend on Saturday. So I appreciate everybody watching another episode of the Daily Beacon Sports Podcast.